Hello. Alrighty. I wrote the button on my drawing pen. New one is arriving, but it's annoying until then. Let's just do a tiny bit more here. That's better, I think. Okay, let's check my list. Ah. Needs to be here. That's why it's so bright. Ah! Oh my god, that was loud. Hi, Chaos Reigns. How are you? just working on this. Even though it is just a render sample, and I should finish it up pretty soon. Well, good. Enjoy your look. I forgot to add alert command, so... Oh, did I forget? Maybe not. Try and lurk. No, mine didn't work. Whoops. It doesn't really matter. Next time. Enjoy your luck. Redeem something or chat occasionally. All is well.
Hmm.
I'm. Cloth. I need to do cloth. And then I need to do a character render. I'm happy with the prop render samples. I can do that better. Let's do it again. I need to change the music. I didn't realize it was just going to repeat. Like, I like the tune, but not for an hour. Yeah. Reference is always the best way to go, it seems. Wait, I'm being dumb anyway. Oh damn. We got 2 things banned by moderator. I don't know what those are. How exciting. Dumb way to do it. I don't know. You can go longer without it. Does this look like cloth? I don't think it does it? Hey, Soda. Welcome, welcome. How are you today, Soda? Ooh, what have you been drawing? I have no idea why your little guy's making stars, to be honest. Ooh, very nice. Make a bunch of friends is cool. Let's find out why you're making stars. Yeah, I have no clue. But either way, you can have that now. I don't know what the input delay on that is. I need to be less dumb and like paintable properly. Let's make that a little bit richer. Did he? Oh yeah. For anyone in stream right now, if I'm at the Discord, how we feel about having like once every 2 weeks or once a month, like an art feedback kind of thing? I'm not perfect for giving feedback, but I was an art teacher. As much as I still struggle with my own work, because art is constantly about learning. I'm kind of interested if that would be intriguing and helpful for people, or not at all. I know it's quite a common format thing with art streaming and so on, but I'm kind of like, if the old teachery skills could help, happy to break them out every so often. So, kind of let me know, I guess, if that would be interesting. Or not interesting, as the case may be. Ex-art teacher. Reformed. Also, your fan art was cool. I really enjoyed it. I mean, the art curriculum I inherited had 12-year-olds doing self-portraits, so everything's better than that. Okay, be honest with me. What does this look like to you guys? It's supposed to be a leg. A Landsknecht leg, basically. In a nose. And a kind of leathery, apron-y number. No, that's fine. Okay, I just need a photo of a hand to paint over quickly. Because I don't want to draw one from scratch. Otto, you okay? We hope you're okay. Okay. I'm very quickly gonna... I never have any qualms about the tracing of hands because screw these things. Silly flesh sausages. Okay, cool. Hands aren't evil. Just dubious in their goodness. You know, yeah, no, feet are evil. Hands are like chaotic neutral. They're not evil, they're not good, they exist and they're a pain because they have all of the joints. Feet though. Feet are another beast. And I do not love feet. I really hope no one takes that one out of context. But no, feet are the worst. They're really hard to draw, they're really difficult to draw. They have all the little joints of hands, but somehow manage to contort themselves into even weirder spaces. I don't really get how it's possible that feet are as annoyingly difficult as they are. It's already the wrong color. Yeah, it's a problem. Like, you just have to ref so much. Like, I get it if someone's really into it, but it's like, I don't need to spend my life looking at this. But I have to, because I have to learn how to draw it in detail. And I have to ref it all the time. And then somehow, even in shoes, still wrong. Trying to eyeball these colors, and it was probably the wrong idea. Well, that's a horrifying thought, isn't it, really? When people joke about wiping their search histories for all sorts of reasons, I'm always like, artist search history, deeply suspicious. It just makes you feel a bit like a serial killer sometimes, you know? Almost like, yeah, no reasonable person should have spent this long looking. Yeah, but then I can't find the references if I need them later, which I inevitably will. We'll do it this way. Oh, it's not the right colour for a fingernail. Fingernails always get me. They're another big one where I'm like, these are weird. I feel weird drawing this thing. They're pinkier, aren't they? That's the weird thing about them. Fingernails? A bunch of reasons. Fingernails are super useful, actually. No. So, fingernails are super cool. They provide a lot of structure to the finger, which is surprisingly useful for like gripping things. It's much harder to grip without a fingernail, without the use of a fingernail. Again, for a whole bunch of reasons. Kind of more similar to like rodent teeth than claws. Which is also a weird statement. But yeah, they're actually super important to the like fleshy bit of our fingers being able to do useful things. There we go. But yeah, like as a general thing, fingernails, like if you didn't have fingernails, gripping would be verging towards impossible. But as you kind of just noted, right, they have a bunch of really sensitive nerves underneath the hard cap of the fingernail. They actually serve a really cool purpose in terms of, like, you can use your nails as a sense for your fingers that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Like, otherwise it would be too sensitive for the hand, and it physically wouldn't be possible to use the finger to detect in that way. Particularly pressure. Like, nails are super good for allowing the pad of the finger to sense pressure on an object, right? If you press your finger down, the bone presses the bottom, but actually your skin presses up against the nail, and that's the thing that gives you a sense of how hard you're pressing. It also, again, it's like, because your fleshy bit of your finger like pushes up against the nail, it acts like a cap. So it's stopping the flesh from moving even further away because it hits a boundary point that it can press against. It's like wearing a belt for weightlifting. Right? Have you ever seen a weightlifting belt? Ever worn a weightlifting belt? It's something you can push against with the muscles in your stomach that allow you to then tense them further. By doing the same thing with the muscles in your finger against your nail, it gives you more power. It's really cool. I think the way the body works with that sometimes is just super awesome. It's like it's designed a system to be more efficient on its own. And it just kind of works. And then we think it doesn't matter and it's vestigial because we've just never not had it. But actually, if you start thinking through the physical logic of it, it's super interesting. It does make you uncomfortably aware of your limbs as a whole, to be honest. Do art kids become unconsciously too aware of your physical form and all of its consequences? Ascend. Right. Do we like that hand? I like that hand. Well, I don't like that hand, but I don't hate it. Which is a win. I'm going to do something really uncomfortable now with this render real quick. Oh, interesting. Eyelashes is a new one to me. I haven't heard people upset about their eyelashes. You didn't like them. Which is also perfectly reasonable, I should clarify. It does. Less fun than you think. Chaos. Less fun than you think. You know that thing, if you repeat a word too often, it kind of becomes meaningless and unusable? Yeah, anything you study anatomy-wise. Like, you can probably tell by the way I'm drawing these damaged fingernails that I've looked at too many damaged fingernails now. And therefore, both the horror of it, but also everything about it, like, no longer really affects me. Too much time. Too much time. Yeah, acidic's right. Like, you just get used to it. And then it's like, now you are just a model to me. You kind of don't. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think it's just like mental conditioning to an extent. It just becomes like, okay, my brain is in drawing mode, and therefore all I'm thinking about is, as Acidic says, like, you're just thinking about color and shape and flow and like visual language. It renders things away from what you might expect. Like, I don't think in that form anymore. There's nothing to admire in a way. So like, square, sphere, slightly different square, sphere. Ooh, that's a cylinder. How exciting! And like you work that way. Everything is rendered down to simple pieces. I also generally have never really seen, like, what is there to be faced by? It's like, people have bodies. We know this, people. We know this. Although I have been pleased with the general artistic movement towards having a wider variety of body shapes available for figure studies, because that wasn't a thing even 5 years ago, really. Or it was hard to find, and now it's like, yeah, no, you can find any body shape you want, which is really useful when you're a concept artist, and body shape is a huge visual language all of its own. So what I'm going to do real quick is add something metal to this, because it's trying to be the full prop composition. Right? That was the point of it, is that it's a composition of a variety of prop elements. Yes. Weirdly, I have a friend, a sword fighting friend, who he's a personal trainer now, but he did train as an artist, and he's like, yeah, it's like personal training is just anatomy and practice. You look at people and you analyze their anatomy and you look for where it's not how it should be, and then you help them get it to how they want it to be, and that's his whole job. It's like, yeah, you know what? Artists are just weird serial killers. Except we draw the weird, gross body parts instead of making them. Where's the light coming from? Soda just self-reporting. Unprompted too, impressive. No, no, I meant the creepiness, not the. No, no, I meant how creepy the statement was. The serial killer self-report. Ah! Fair. You own it, Soda. Strong. Very strong. Oh god, my chat are all serial killers. Well, I knew what I was getting into. Okay, this goal is, It was a bad correction there. Maybe it was okay. What do we need now? We need just a little bit of wood. Yeah, absolutely not. I don't want any confusion over the fact that I absolutely have no issue with trans people. I very much... This is a safe and inclusive space, and I try really hard to make sure people know that. Because I think safe, inclusive spaces are important, and I would like happy art inclusive spaces to exist. So I'm making one. And anyone who doesn't like it can go away. But yeah. You ought to be double careful being British nowadays to reinforce the point to people. My platform is not big enough for that, but I also think it's just important to passionately stand up for things you believe in. Anyway, right. Like, why have any ambiguity to it? I see no reason to leave it ambiguous unless I have ulterior motives. And as I do not, no ambiguity allowed. I'll just be very straightforward. No, we're inclusive to the bigots. They just don't get to be horrible to people. Like, if someone bigoted wants to join the space, that's fine. They just have to confront their own biases in the process. Or they can go away. Constructive and healthy conversation is good. Harmful conversation is not. It's very simple. Okay. I should have kept the reference here for this hand, because I can't quite remember how it's supposed to look, but this is fine. Let's do...
Answer the call, for a new load has come. In times of change, things seem strange. Dragonkind's strength is evermore.
Someone told this guy it was a really, really cool bit of music he was making, and I'm afraid to say it is not. And I don't know why it's here.
answer the call, for a new Lord has come. Don't be afraid, we won't fade. Dragons will reign evermore.
Yeah, people just like hate, I think, is the problem. It's a very easy, comfy place to be, sadly. It's much harder to challenge your own preconceptions. That's why I respect people that are willing to do it, right? I'm not necessarily right, you're not necessarily right. No one's necessarily right. The ability to self-reflect is very valuable and very rare. Which is okay, you don't necessarily have to live your life self-reflecting, but you know, it's why I try and... Okay, this is sometimes a more controversial, but rather than treating it as an absolute moral thing, I'm like, well, this is my decision, right? To be an inclusive person is an active decision I have made. Because I think it's correct. I think it's morally the right thing. Not because it's an absolute morally correct thing. You can disagree with me, that's fine, you're entitled. You're entitled to think differently and so on, but my argument then often becomes like, at what point do you, like, my default, I suppose, is always going to be on the side of, I'll call it kindness, or like generosity of spirit and humanity. Like, why not just let people be happy and themselves? There's no downside for me, there's no downside for them, like, it's just do it. But I can understand if you don't feel that way, but just inherently understand that I may not want to interact with you in the same aspect if that's the case, and that's okay too. Like, you're making a choice. And don't try and tell me that your choice is better than mine. I've made the decision that my choice is better than yours, and that's fine. Exactly. Where I think it's particularly awful is created, targeted hate for the sake of self-advancement, cough cough politicians, cough cough, and that I think is just evil. Creating hate, inequality, or injustice is a fundamentally evil life choice. And I have no time or respect for that. Literally none at all. Like, why should I? At that point, you don't deserve the respect. I don't necessarily agree with that, actually. As someone who studies classics, for example, you see a lot of examples where, like, politicians who do the correct thing are great. Right? They serve a key function and purpose in society that isn't evil. The problem is the people that co-opt that role and that power and so on for their own personal aggrandizement. They're evil. That we agree on. Yeah, politicians as a whole, I think, can be a very positive thing, actually. You just have to get Like, it's just, there's a lot tied into that. A lot has to go right in a way that often doesn't. Do we like this little amulet, by the way? Is that a nice amulet? I haven't painted the strap yet, but thank you. But we like the amulet itself. The amulet itself is nice. Hey, as long as it stays within the boundary of the wholesome stream, we're all good. Technically, not a family-friendly stream. Okay. Ex-safeguarding person here. I do not love the idea of children engaging with Twitch particularly. And so I feel like marketing myself towards under 18s is kind of silly. I don't mark myself as plus 18 because I feel like that gives a different interpretation to people, and I don't want that interpretation necessarily either of this stream. But yeah, I don't market this as an under 18 stream for a reason. So as a general thing, you can engage, but on the other hand, I appreciate self-restraint. Always a good thing if you feel like it's the right decision for you. I don't necessarily agree with that. The internet can have use for children, but they just... Well... Here's an interesting one. Banning children from social media, which is the new law that's being put in place in the UK. What do we think? It's always an interesting topic. Hmm. And out of interest, do you feel it's something that is over impinging on personal freedom or fine? Because this is always a sticking point for people. Is the government becoming too involved in things that shouldn't be governmental decisions, or is this, we think, within acceptable bounds? There we go. Interesting. Yeah, so Chaos Runes, I would disagree with your statement because I think both of those things then just remove the purpose. External sites governing themselves is very dangerous because. Mm, yeah, I think it's very tricky. But yeah, I don't see easy fixes as well. I think fixes just take a long time, right? And that's part of the problem. We'll see where we get to, in a way. I think the problem is predators prey on everyone. Which is kind of its innate nature, right? Predation relies on getting everyone in some respect. True. So, as someone who did internet safety, like semi-training with parents, right? What happens when you have a parent who decides they do not care? Not agreeing or disagreeing, by the way, but just it's an interesting point of like, what if you have a parent who decides they don't care that much? Because we do have a provision for that in terms of like everything else. Right? We have a provision for well, so we have a provision for parents that fail to parent, right? Legally. If you are inadequate within, I guess, let's say the function of parenting, if you choose to not really parent your child, we decide that the state has a mandate to be involved in that for the protection of children from inadequate parenting. So at what point does that provision also extend to the internet? Right? Because there is a point to it. Okay, so this is maybe a slightly more weird angle to think about it, but at what point is a child a being with their own rights, and at what point is a child the property of their parent in the eyes of the law? Well, exactly, which is why it is a very complex thing, right? The care of children is very complex in all aspects. Completely. So, but what I mean is, at what point is it a parent's complete individualistic control? And at what point does the government have a role to go, we provide something that accommodates for the parents who choose not to do this, so that children have the same standard of safety and protection for the ones that do have good parents and the ones who don't. And that's the situation this is at, right? It's trying to hit a point where, in their opinion, and it's not necessarily correct, as always, but the purpose of this, right, is, in our opinion, this is a base standard of safety that children deserve. And so we're creating and enforcing a rule so that children can always feel, across the board, regardless of the skill or care of a parent, that they have that same right to safety. it's a situation that I think is in some ways unresolvable, right? Because when you create a universal standard, not everyone agrees, and it's not necessarily correct, but also you can't then extend a rule. Well, you can, but it's difficult where you extend a rule and you're like, well, some parents can do this because they're doing it the right way, and some parents can do this because they're doing it the wrong way, and we're going to arbitrarily decide that. I think that's almost worse than just going, we're creating a singular standard for everyone that we think is correct, right or wrong. Like, that's where I think it's tricky. The discussion is like, the internet is unsafe because there are very predatory people on the internet, and as a standard, parents are not doing, like, there are enough parents doing this badly that it is a huge problem. And so we are creating a standard of protection for all children that will also affect those who are not being badly parented. Is that not an ideal? Which also ties into other conversation. I'm not saying this is even the correct take as well. Like, I think this is very important for me to note that this is I'm actually not even technically stating my opinion. I am devil's advocating each point because I think it's interesting as someone that that worked in this sector but also studied philosophy and ethics. It's always interesting to play with the concept of, like, the extent, because everything is about extents, right? It's not about every action has an extent to which it is fundamentally in some way acceptable or unacceptable, and at some point you hit a barrier, I feel, and it's what that barrier is and why you're hitting it that I think becomes the actual conversation, or should be the actual conversation. So, weirdly, I see the point you're making, and yes, I'm raising kind of a broader point, I suppose, because that ties in with it. But I would again raise the kind of counter-argument of, like, rather than it being removing the internet, right? It's specifically removing access to things that are categorically known to be harmful. I agree completely, you don't solve the root of the problem necessarily, but it's like, why do you not sell alcohol to children? Right? Or cigarettes. Cigarettes is maybe more involved now because they're doing different things with cigarettes to different ages, and like, that's a whole thing. But, like, why do you not sell alcohol to children? It's quite a restrictive thing in a way, right? Because you could argue, again, devil's advocating to an extent, like, you could argue that that is taking parenting away from parents, but I don't think people would argue with that concept. The idea of, like, children not being taken advantage of by people willing to sell alcohol to them. But then does that cause a problem with alcohol consumption later in life? Because they don't necessarily understand the advantage being taken part of that. Like, that becomes another conversation, right? And so at every step, I think there is kind of a fundamental conversation that changes each time, which is fine, like, it has to change, right? That's normal. But is there always a moment where there will be something harmful? We know that. Yeah, fair point, right? At what age? At what age do we allow children to have sex, to get pregnant? Like, restriction is not particularly consistent either, I would also say that. But I do think there's an important point where it's like, what's the value of something like Okay, so YouTube, for example, I think has value to children below the age of 16. But genuinely, what's the value of Twitch? Where, like, you have free reign currently as a child to wander onto a stream not designed for you, which could be harmful or expose you to something harmful. And, like, that's not a... I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but that is a thing. Like, there is a level of exposure that you are opening yourself to, or being open to, that can be very damaging and can lead to damaging things, but not all parents are equipped. And, like, there's a general broad thing here of, like, a lot of parents are not equipped for that. Now, at what point does the government go, well, we just need to educate everyone better, which is what they tried with cigarettes originally, right? Or with alcohol a lot, like, don't drink as much. Which I think is very reasonable. But at what moment do you go, okay, well, we're just not going to allow the harmful thing to be sold to children, or, like, peddled to children to an extent, right? We're just going to intervene directly, perhaps controversially, but, like, the path we have chosen is a form of direct intervention in the interests of protection and safety, and, like, that I think is tricky. Direct intervention is always tricky, because I don't disagree, of course, that, like, the government intervention is always a slippery, dangerous kind of thing. But at the same time, I used to send out, like, an email every month to parents being like, these are things you should be aware of. And one of the big ones was always Roblox. I'll use as an example. Roblox and kids is tricky. It is marketed for children, but it has very poor child protection, right? But another one used to be like TikTok. How many parents in the last 5 years, when TikTok's become super huge, have known that TikTok has a direct message function? Right? That's a very simple thing where it's like, well, if you don't know that, this gets very dangerous very quickly, or can do. You don't know that danger exists. Now, I'm not saying government intervention is the answer to that question either, but it is an interesting point of, like, what if you, on the other hand, are a parent who does know, and you don't care? Now, your child's not necessarily safe under your care regardless, but is there not, to some extent, a responsibility of society, almost like a societal responsibility, to help protect those children when their own parents won't? And I'm not necessarily saying that there is, but I think it's something to consider. And that ties into this whole conversation at the moment, right, with internet protection for children. It's like, maybe a better way to think about it, to some extent, is like, this is the backup plan. Now, is it a good backup plan? Maybe not. I would argue pretty confidently not. It's not as well thought through as it should be, as usual. But is it fundamentally bad, or does it serve a purpose, is always interesting. Yeah, no, I completely disagree. You don't have to keep it wholesome, as I kind of said at the start, right? You you can... Mostly wholesome is acceptable. If you feel it is important for your point, you can say things. But I don't disagree either. Like, there's definitely a point where you are exposing more danger in your attempts to reduce danger, and that's dumb. On the other hand, the number of kids that I've personally had to like deal with situations where they were just exposed to things on the internet that they shouldn't have been, kind of arbitrarily, because it's just a facet of being on a social media platform. TikTok is a big one, but like all of them, to be honest, I think is a very tricky thing. It's harder to justify the usage of things that actively cause harm, I think. But also, I think it's hard to justify blanket rules. And yeah, I do think it lacks a level of critical thinking, definitely. Like, it's thinking something through, but it's definitely not thinking everything through. And I think that's really important too, right? Is if you're going to make big sweeping decisions, it's really important to think everything through. Not just most of it, not just some of it, all of it. All the consequences. And of course, it has the risk, like with anything, of when you illegalize in any way or like restrict, are you just pushing people to less legal means of accessing what they desire, right? I agree. Do you require access to platforms to do that exploration? Like, okay, slightly weird one, but like, why do we consider things like access to social media important for information? Like, why are those two things paired in essence? And this is where I would argue, like, surely you can do situation to some extent, I think. And this is maybe where, again, I think the conversation loses nuance governmentally, which is always frustrating. But it's like, maybe there is a value to thinking about it as both. Education for children should be increased. Oh no, I completely agree. Okay, so I taught at boarding school, right? And I have had that conversation with kids actively. Because it's like, but at the same time, the internet is not a good place for answers. And like, we've seen that as a huge problem. In education, that's a huge problem, right? It's kind of like, has a lot of knock-on effects, including predation. But simultaneously, there is a solution to that, which is you can preempt to an extent, and you can create open channels of dialogue as a parent, as a teacher, as a society. It's like, well, a good example I'd use is like puberty for children. Like, in the past, that was a taboo subject, which means people didn't talk about it, so people were uninformed, and this is an active problem. But now it's like that dialogue in this country starts quite young, comparative. Like, generally before puberty starts is the idea, so that is not a scary unknown thing. Now, I agree that that's not always a comfortable space, and particularly with parents, and like, there is a moment where individual exploration and understanding is valuable. Like, when I taught science to, what is it, year 5? 9, 10-year-olds. Like, puberty, sex, reproduction, like, as a whole. Like, that's part of that curriculum now. Which I think it should be. Like, I think that's correct to an extent. Because they're not quite so young that it's not going to sink in a little bit and, like, be a helpful conversation, but they're also not old enough that it's mortifying. And I think there is a balance you have to hit in education as a whole and as parents as a whole, but, like, I also think you can have that conversation at that age. You can start that dialogue. And yeah, there'll be embarrassment and there'll be misunderstanding and like so on, but I think it's important that that's the perspective people keep, is like, it shouldn't be a banned thing to talk about with children. But importantly, I really do believe strongly, like, the internet should not be the source of that education for children, because I have seen that outcome too and dealt with the consequences of that outcome, and it is not good. And there's a lot of really interesting statistics about that outcome too. And so I think it should be paired. Like, do I agree with banning the internet? I'm still kind of undecided in a way, because I see both sides of the argument very strongly. But I do see a world where it's like, no, the primary means of education on particularly things like sex for children should not be the internet. Should not be just unfiltered human information that they can access, which is what the internet fundamentally kind of is, but also unfiltered information with an agenda, which is also tricky, right? People do not create unbiased content very often on the internet for that kind of thing, because there are always filters that you see the world through. And education, the education system, your parents, none of this is unbiased, but I do think there's a great danger to seeking knowledge for that kind of thing on the internet, and I've seen that cause a lot of harm already. I don't know, but I think this is a topic I ran up into the safeguarding side of things. Yeah, bias is fine though, right? Like, bias is human. And we choose on a bias societally and individually in our life to follow. Everyone is biased. You have to accept that in life, right? There is no such thing as an unbiased person, even if people try really hard to be. It's not possible. But there is a reason we approach reproduction as a science teaching, right? Which is, you have to deal with the social, ethical, emotional side of everything, but it is also important that the basic scientific information is imparted in a basic scientific manner. I feel that quite strongly. Because I think it's really important that for a child, the information they receive is just as unbiased as it can be, and that is like the hard facts of your body will do this, their body will do that. You need to know this. Without question, this is important. There is no middle ground where it is okay for you to not know this information. You have to know this. You have to know it in enough detail that you can live your life. Everything else can kind of be patched in later, to be honest. It's really important that the core information is correct and accessible. And that you're not surprised as a child going into your life, but particularly puberty and like sexual exploration as a whole. Like, you need to know that properly in a very basic way. And again, we can kind of like parents can deal with things in different ways. If you have religious persuasions, like I may not agree with them, but it's difficult to tell people not to believe strongly in what they believe in. I'm not necessarily right, they're not necessarily wrong, right? But there is a baseline of there's stuff you have to know because it will happen to everyone. It is an unchangeable fact, and this is important. Really important. And everything else can come later. Everything else can come later. And even like the acknowledgement of bias is also acknowledging that like there are some things that have to be, I think, beyond that bias. You can deal with it. Like that's key to me. And from there, I think, yeah, it's like the government will intervene. The government has control of some things. It has to. That's its job. The government's core role in society is to make important decisions for people that an individual couldn't make or cannot be trusted to fully make, which is always a weird one. But like fundamentally, something like the protection of children, I do see a great value in that. And I suppose I also see a great value in something very specific with the internet, which is it's so fast changing, and I don't think necessarily are doing it correctly, but I think there is a moment where you have to look at it and go, there are people who know more about this than most people. And we need to see what they say, and we need to see what the data says. And like, if you look at data on the internet, it's kind of horrifying. To be honest, it's not nice. It's not happy. Internet data is very confronting. I personally found. Again, I was working and reviewing a lot of information. And it's like, yeah, like at a baseline, exposure to pornography, super bad for children. Which sounds self-explanatory, like it sounds obvious, but like there's a lot of data on that. A shocking amount of available data about the harm it can cause. Social media and like predation. And if we know these things, we see these things, we can solve some of these problems. Like categorically, we can protect children from some things by making these decisions. And that's where I think it's a good thing. On the other hand, as we often see, like, do governments research enough? Do they talk to the right people and experts? Also, do they talk to the wrong people? Often. So, like, it's not a perfect or good solution always. But I can see a world in which there is that value, and those decisions should be made. And sometimes I think you can hit the right decision almost by accident, and that's not a bad thing either. So, like, yeah, this build, like, my personal opinion, being slightly less devil's advocate for one moment, is like, I think it's mostly there, but it's not quite, right? I think it actually isn't a bad thing. I don't think they're doing it fully correctly, and I don't think they have researched fully enough the remainder of this build, like, to have put it through. Do I think it's wrong? No. Do I think they're doing it right? No. I think it's an execution failure, not a concept failure. But the execution failure then leads to the failure of the concept, right? And so, again, I feel the same when they introduced, like, the age verification stuff. It's like completely mess up every step of that. Which is frustrating. That genuinely I find frustrating, right? It's like, how do you get so close to doing something really positive and then mess it up so badly? And do I want to know how they've managed to achieve that? Alright. Does this look like the stuff I want it to look like? What do we think? No. That cloth is awful over there. Yes and no. Okay, so to be honest, there's a lot of stuff that governments kind of do just passively really well. This is the thing that's ridiculous, right? Not always perfectly, don't get me wrong, but if you think of like general infrastructure, for example, like the country has power and water and like access to food. Like the government's really good at its job, sort of. The bit that doesn't require people making lots of choices all the time, like the logistics side of things, governments are really good at. Debating properly is great. It's a very important part of life. It's very good for the soul. That's why I do it all the time. But yeah, I think governments are really good at a load of stuff. It just happens to be that government as a concept is always going to rub people the wrong way, right? Governance is not a nice thing. It's an important thing to an extent. It stops people doing whatever the hell they want, which is bad. I think unrestricted human freedom in some ways is a very good thing, and in some ways is a very bad thing, because bad people have as much access to that as good people, and bad people exist and are horrible, right? But on the other hand, pure governmental control is also terrible, right? There is a balance. And democracy is not very good at managing that balance because it tends to sway with people, and people are bad at making choices. Good choices, especially. Yeah, so this is why. So I obviously have an active interest in politics. I said I sort of studied philosophy and ethics, and governance is a big part of philosophy and ethics, right? And I find it really fascinating. But there's a really irritating thing I see in modern politics, particularly in the UK, but like everywhere, which is, yeah, we're just going to shout at you until you shut up, and we can make our point, and then you're going to shout at us until we shut up, and you're going to make it. And it's like, that's not the purpose. Right? You have to be prepared to be wrong. You have to be prepared to be right when you're right and wrong when you're wrong. And that means giving and taking. Talking when you should talk, listening when you should listen. Accepting when you're wrong, knowing and fighting for when you're right. That's the essence of debate, and structure I think is also important, and like I think it's a really big part of why modern discourse is so strained, is people aren't willing to sit and listen and have their minds changed. They go into it with an idea that they want to be the truth. Exactly. Why have the conversation if you're not willing to change your mind? At that point, you're not here for a conversation. Weirdly, this ties, like, I kind of said it when we were talking about bigots, right? It's like, I'm very welcoming if someone wants to be a bigot, but to come into this space and have that conversation in good faith, they are welcome as long as they're here to have that conversation in good faith. Because there's no point having a conversation if you're not willing to change. Like, if you're here to argue with me and get your point across and you're not going to listen to mine, why would I bother talking with you? Like, I'm not here to... I'm here to listen to your argument and give you mine, and hopefully gain something on both sides, right? There's a level of an exchange of empathy that's super important. And if you're not willing to exchange your empathy for mine, if you're not willing to give what I am also, like, you should be willing to give your opinion and take mine, and gain some empathy for me in the same way that I am going to be gaining empathy for you. And if you can't do that, we shouldn't be here. Like, that is a fundamental basis, in my opinion. My job isn't to make you feel good about your opinion. Like, a discussion is, this is what I think, and I believe that. I'm not having it to annoy you, and like, if you disagree, I'm willing to talk it through because I'm interested to know what it is that I've got wrong in your eyes, right? The essence of that debate is like, you clearly think that I'm wrong, and I'm interested as to why and how. And if you can convince me that I'm wrong, then I'll change my mind. Like, if you can give me a good argument, I'm very happy to change. Because I can't go into a discussion thinking I'm right and you're wrong and that's never going to change, because then we're not talking now. We're just beating each other over the heads with like nonsense. Like, there's no value to this. There's no gain. Because also, okay, in a weird way as well, right? If I'm right, and I know I'm right categorically, there's no point having this conversation anyway. Right? If you're not going to change your mind and I'm not going to change my mind, and we're both convinced in our own righteousness, then this conversation wasn't worth it. Because there needs to be something we both gain from this. Converting people to your opinion is, I think you're right for a good reason, and I think I'm right for a good reason. And these two things aren't mutually exclusive, right? Me being right doesn't make you wrong either. There's a weirdness to that I think is quite important. Like, it's okay for me to be correct and you to be correct, to both have good points, to both have well-reasoned arguments. This is good. It's a positive. But within that, it's also like, well, that also comes with the necessary thing of like, well, maybe neither of us are going to change our mind here. I don't expect, you shouldn't expect that someone is going to uproot their life view for you, but you should expect that they have enough grace to be open to the concept of it. Or don't have the conversation. Just don't bother. It's not worth it. But if someone is willing to have that conversation, I think it's great. I think it's a really positive thing that humans do, and I don't think we do enough of it as a society right now. And I realized that I've waxed very lyrical for ages. Sorry. But yeah, I agree, Chaos. And I think it's also about empathy. It's about spreading understanding of others. Because my opinion is what makes me me. And so sharing that with you is a way to share my personhood. And I think that's really valuable. But I should wrap up stream. I feel pretty good about these last two props. Well, the arm and the cloth, I should say. Like, I don't feel as great about the rest of it, but I think that's fine. Like this cloth thing. I think the amulet's nicer than the rest of the arm too. But actually, I'm pretty happy with how I've rendered as a whole today. Like, I actually really like this leg. To be honest. I'm quite pleased with the outcome of that work. It's definitely not perfect, but I think it's pretty cool. Yes, right, stream end. We'll find somebody to raid. I streamed way later than usual, but I also started quite late today, so you got bonus time, I guess. Alright, this was last day on props. We're on to some other cool stuff tomorrow, I think. So that'll be fun. Actually, what do we move first? Control A. Oh no, I have to do it this way. Okay. Okay. And we're just going to do a real quick formatting change. Edit, change canvas size. 10K across is fine. That'll be kind of funny. Actually, do I want to do it this way? Maybe I'll leave it how it was. Yeah, I think I just removed the sorry, as I just change a couple of things. That's not quite right. Oh well. And this bottle. There we go. Okay, click save because we're not dumb. And then basically 3 hours, which is going to be more regular, by the way, for stream timings, just so you know. These are going to stop being longer streams. But I'm going to wrap up now, so I hope you all have a lovely evening, day, whatever time it is, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.